myself and Dr. Badhaman were also part of that expert committee. We redrafted this draft legislation of society and added few things and resubmitted to the ministry, and another a larger committee was constituted. They have also given their comments, but unfortunately still things are lying pending with the Ministry of Mines, and we are approaching Honorable Minister and Honorable Secretary Mines to take up the issue. Now, as told, just to popularize our geoheritage sites, we are publishing some articles, special issue. This is the special issue of Geography and You on geoheritage sites of India, and some articles on down to earth. Now, despite of all in efforts, we are still lagging behind. Very small countries are protecting their geoheritage. They have UNESCO Global Geoparks, but we are far behind in doing this. And we are approaching every corner of the government, and we are approaching everyone. And if we are not successful, we are bound to approach Honorable Supreme Court of India very soon. So I thank everyone for patient hearing, and I request everyone to be united and come forward for our crusade to save our geoheritage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tripathi ji. So that was the Secretary of the Society giving a primer of the various geoconservation sites that deserve conservation in our country, and the several efforts that have been made and are still ongoing to protect these geological monuments and geoheritage sites. In fact, we have had more than 20 webinars and discussions, all in the virtual mode in the past couple of years, concerning the various geoheritage sites in the country. So, although efforts have been made all these days, there is still something that is missing. We still need a punch to drive home this point among the politicians, the powers that be. And perhaps today's webinar would give us some tips and would help us. And before we have the webinar, I would like to introduce the speaker to you. Is it possible for me to share the screen? Host, Tripathi ji?
You can share.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing. So,
Gunjan, you just see.
Tripathi ji, you need to give the access to them. If you see the participant list, you can manage from there.
Why can't you do it? Because I'm not very well conversant.
Just a minute, sir.
You do it from your end.
So until I get the permission, let me be speaking something. Today's speaker is a renowned authority on geoheritage and geoconservation. And it will be very, very useful to all of us to hear him and to take further steps to reach our goal of preserving and conserving our geoheritage sites, and also to establish some geoparks in the coming years. I've had the opportunity of visiting, the speaker in 2018, and I had a brief discussion with him. And he's a wonderful host. So when I say this, José, you must be prepared to accept many Indian scientists who will come as visiting guests to your department. But He has done a lot of work, and it was a great pleasure for me to see his work. Has it been possible, Tripathi ji, Gunjan
Sir,
ji?
he has given permission. You just please check up.
Okay, yes, I'm able to.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, okay, sir.
Thank you. Full screen, yes. So that's, our speaker for today's webinar. People like me who are not, introduced to Portuguese way of pronunciation would easily call him José Brilha. But I'm told that, correct pronunciation of this speaker is José Brilha. José Brilha. So José lives in Braga, which is in northern part of Portugal. It's a lovely city. It has a lot of history, replete with exquisite art and architecture. And it's filled with warm and nice people. But the warmest of them all is here, right in our midst virtually. That's José. He works at the University of Minho in Braga. He's a geologist and a full professor in the Department of Earth Sciences. So here you see José with some of his colleagues in front of the building where it says School of Sciences, School of Earth Sciences, and Department of Earth Sciences at the very bottom. José has been teaching for the past 33 years, not only in Portugal, but also in several countries like Australia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Greece, Iran, Mexico, Morocco, Mozambique, Romania, Saudi Arabia, Spain, Switzerland, Turkey, the UK, and the USA. Of course, his research is mainly centered on geoheritage and geoconservation. And he is also involved in the university management or administration. For example, he has been the director of the Earth Sciences Department and the Earth Science Research Center. He's also been the president of the Council of School of Sciences and several other positions, which I'm not listing here. Any good scientist would also, engage himself or herself in outreach activities because they realize how important it is not only to do research, but to take this research to common people, to young students, and to school kids. He has given several television programs, written articles in newspapers, and organized workshops in the field of geoconservation and geoheritage. I won't go into all of those details. José graduated in geology from the University of Coimbra in 1987. He has a PhD from the University of Minho in 1997. He also has a habilitation certificate. This is unlike in India. In Europe, it's a certification that is needed for a person to be teaching in universities. And this is also from the University of Minho in 2013. He has held several important positions in geoheritage and geoconservation. Anybody would envy all of these positions that José has held, and some of them he is still holding. For example, I've only listed a few of them here. Deputy Chair of the Geoheritage Specialist Group Steering Committee, Coordinator of the Working Group Geoheritage Assessment of the International Commission on Geoheritage, President of ProGeo, which is the European Association for the Conservation of Geological Heritage. He is and was a member of several bodies like the UNESCO Advisory Group of Global Geoparks Network, the roster of evaluators of global geoparks, and the scientific board of IGCP. Continuing, he was also a member in the IUCN, that is the International Union for Conservation of Nature, World Commission on Protected Areas, the IUGS Geoheritage Task Group, the International Association for Promoting Geoethics Task Group on Geoethics and Geoheritage. Let's look at this research output. It is tremendous. He is responsible for 39 edited books or book chapters and papers published in these books. And he has 83 papers published in international and national peer-reviewed journals. He has presented 170 abstracts, made 65 presentations, and made 44 invited oral presentations in international and national congresses. He has supervised students for 14 PhD theses, 5 are still in the pipeline, and 26 master's dissertation, and 1 is about to be submitted. He has published, several books, as I mentioned. A few of them are here. This is Geoheritage, edited by Renard and Brilha, and Geological Heritage, Geosites to Visit in Portugal, Brilha. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have great pleasure to present today's speaker, Professor José Brilha. And he would be delivering a webinar on geodiversity and geoheritage, recent international development as a contribution to a national geoconservation strategy. And this is the talk that we've been eagerly looking forward to all these days. And we have the speaker here all ready to give his talk. And I hope, as do all of you, that his talk will be illuminating and give us broad outlines as to how we can proceed in our goal of establishing geoparks in the country and to promote geotourism and to protect and conserve our geoheritage. Jose, the floor is yours. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you very much. I am overwhelmed with your presentation, with your extended presentation. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. First of all, of course, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this event, and congratulate you for the organizing of this event, that I understand that this year it has to be an online event, but of course it will have full power when we can come back organizing field activities. I hope that moment will be very soon. So again, thank you very much for your nice words and nice presentation. It was also a pleasure for me to receive you here a couple of years ago in my city. And so let me start my presentation. Okay, I hope that you are now seeing my first slide.
Yes, please, we are able to see.
Okay, thank you, great. So the idea is to give you in the next 30 minutes or so, 40 minutes, to give you my perspective about some key concepts related with geodiversity and geoheritage, and also to give you a broad overview about how these topics today are evolving at the international level, and how these developments are expected to reach the national level. I understand that many of you are trying to develop this topic in your country, which is obviously very, very important. So I hope that some of these ideas can be helpful for your task in India. It's very difficult to give a recipe because each country is a different country. Each country has its own social setting, political setting, cultural setting. So it's difficult to give a recipe that is working very well in one country, but perhaps the same recipe in another country, it will be a failure. So it takes time in each national community to understand how and what are the best steps forward in order to develop a geoconservation strategy in each country. Of course, that I can only give you an overview about what is happening in a couple of countries, and you have to see if these developments will be useful for you. Probably they are not useful because the context is completely different. So let me start here with a couple of key concepts, and I will start with the concept of geodiversity. In 2018, we have published a paper trying to revisit the concept of geodiversity and to try to define the links that we can establish with this very broad word. And I will just, of course, I don't have time to detail all these links that we have here, but I'd like to underline that, of course, geodiversity underpins biodiversity, and this geodiversity consists on the variety of non-living elements of nature. So minerals, fossils, rocks, landforms, soils, water, and the active processes that are building these materials and these landforms. Today, we can characterize geodiversity either in a quantitative way and also in a qualitative way. We can calculate, there are several methods to calculate geodiversity indexes and to represent these geodiversity indexes in a map in order, for instance, to compare the map of the geodiversity index with the map of the biodiversity index and to see in a certain region if there is an overlap of these two indexes or not. These are mainly interesting for scientific and technical purposes. But we can also have, and we can characterize geodiversity in a qualitative way. We can describe the elements that exist in a certain territory. This description, of course, is mainly also for scientific and technical purposes, but also important for education and for general outreach. We can and we should make a link between geodiversity and terms that are used by politicians and by people working with nature conservation in general. And so we should underline that geodiversity contributes to the natural capital. Natural capital is made by all natural elements and features produced by nature. And of course, there is a contribution from geodiversity. And also we should underline that geodiversity provides benefits in terms of ecosystem services. These words, these terms of natural capital and ecosystem services are, as I said, used in the political discourse, and they are also used in the international policies regarding nature conservation and land use planning. So we should, in a strategic way, we should show where the links are between geodiversity and these words. Of course, that these ecosystem services, meaning the benefits that we can extract from the ecosystems, of course, that they are based in several values: scientific value, educational value, economical value, cultural, aesthetic, and other values provided by the geodiversity elements. And in fact, there are these elements there are these values that can support the different types of uses that we can have on geodiversity. So usually the most common and the most traditional use is regarding the extractable natural resource. So I'm meaning the most common use for geodiversity is the exploitation of geological resources, of course. But we should also underline that today we can have another type of uses that is related with the non-extractable natural resources. And here, and this is exactly the main focus of this presentation, is to talk about this kind of non-extractable natural resources, meaning what kind of use we can have of these elements without being removed from their original place. And so we are talking about geoconservation and geoheritage. This is the main framework regarding the concept of geodiversity. Usually I use this diagram to relate, of course, with biodiversity, and both geodiversity and biodiversity constitutes the natural diversity that we have in our planet. But looking just for the geodiversity elements, I would like to stress the importance of the scientific value. And I will tell you a little bit more about this scientific value. But when we have elements with scientific value, meaning elements that are important for the scientific research on geology in general, we can have these elements in two situations. Either we have in situ elements, meaning we have rocks, fossils, so in their outcrops, in the original place where they are formed. So we are referring generally as a geosite, a site where we have these elements in the original place, in situ. But we can also have ex situ elements, meaning elements that were already removed from their original places and now are, for instance, part of museum collections. And we should not forget that these elements that are in collections, they can also maintain the scientific value, and they are also considered geoheritage. But we have, of course, the other elements, the other values, sorry, and I'm referring specifically to educational value, touristic value. So elements that don't have a real interesting scientific value, but have important other values. And I call those sites as geodiversity sites. And of course, ex situ, these geodiversity elements. And I tend to focus the word geoheritage in those elements that have scientific value. I don't have time to detail why I give this privilege to the scientific value, but in fact, I consider this value very important. And in addition, not only very important, is the most objective criteria. It is not very easy to define criteria in order to select one granite from another granite. Why should we conserve one granite and we can destroy the other granite for making a road? So we have to have good and clear criteria to make this distinction. And I think that the scientific value is the most objective one, and that is why I give this privilege to this value. So I tend to focus the word geoheritage on these elements with the scientific value, but of course, it implies that these geosites can have other types of values. That doesn't mean that it has only scientific value. It has scientific value, of course, but it can have other types of values also. And I can consider that geoconservation, which is all the strategies that identify and assess and manage this heritage and these elements should be applied to all these sites that have important values. So I am not, when I talk about geoconservation, I'm not just talking about geoheritage, I'm talking about all elements that have any type of value. So geoheritage is composed of elements of geodiversity with specific value, and I said before, specifically scientific value. So when I'm talking about minerals, of course, this is part of the mineralogical heritage. When I'm talking about rocks, I'm talking about petrological heritage. Landforms is the basis for geomorphological heritage, fossils for the paleontological heritage, structures for the tectonic heritage, GSSPs, and before we learned that there is in India one GSSP for the Quaternary, is called stratigraphical heritage, and other types of heritage. For instance, soils, I refer to pedological heritage, and these are just part of under the umbrella of the geological heritage. So I'd like also to stress that the type of heritage is related with the nature of the element. So if we have a music that is very important for a certain culture, we of course are talking about intangible cultural heritage. If we are talking about a temple, we are talking about cultural heritage. If we are talking about an animal or a species that is very important, we are calling biological heritage. If we are referring to a rock painting, it's archaeological heritage. So what is geological heritage or geoheritage in short? It refers to a mineral, a rock, a fossil, or a landform. So I'd like to stress this because sometimes we read in the literature some confusion about what is real, the elements that made geological heritage. And for instance, sometimes I see people saying that a rock painting is part of the geological heritage, when it is not. A rock painting is part of the archaeological heritage. It's not geological heritage. So that's why I'd like to stress this point, that the type of heritage is related with the nature of the element that is important. So we have geological sites, and I use this term of geological sites applied to geosites and geodiversity sites. So we have geological sites which are a natural resource. This natural resource is a non-renewable natural resource. It means that many of these sites, once they are destroyed forever. For instance, if we have an outcrop with dinosaur bones, if this outcrop is destroyed, it will be destroyed forever because, as we all know, dinosaurs are extinct, so it is not possible to renew new fossils of dinosaurs. So it's a non-renewable resource. It has different types of values. It has different types of uses, and I will talk a little bit after about these uses, and they can be affected by threats, either natural threats and also man-made threats. Okay. Of course, that the man-made threats are the most severe, and I will also describe these threats a little bit later. So we have, to simplify, three main types of uses for geological sites. We have the scientific use, we have the educational use, and we have an economic use through geotourism. So in particular, regarding now the scientific use, this scientific use is very important because it will guarantee that we have geological elements for present and future research. We know that in the geologists, and in 50 years from now or 100 years from now, they will have new tools, they will have new equipment, they will have new techniques in order to develop the knowledge. And they need to have access to those places that are very important because they are key places to understand the geology of our planet. So these places need to be preserved in order to guarantee that present and future research can be developed. Also, we need to guarantee accessibility to geological collections, as I said before. It is very important, for instance, for paleontologists, they need to have access to these specimens that are stored in museums in order to compare with their own fossils. And of course, sometimes we have problems to explain to the society and to politicians why we need to preserve and to conserve rocks. This is a huge challenge to explain to the leader of a local community, for instance, why we should spend money in order to protect a rock. To protect animals, people are starting to understand that we need to spend money and resources to protect some animals and some species. But it is still very difficult to explain why we need to spend public money from the taxes of everyone to protect a rock. So we need to have clear arguments, clear justification why we need to protect a certain rock. Regarding the educational use, of course, I include here formal and informal educational use. This educational use is particularly important in sites where we have well-represented geological elements that can be easily understood by students and where they can access these sites in safe conditions. And sometimes sites for scientific use and educational use are the same, are very similar. These sites with educational relevance can be also very useful because they can we can establish links with other topics, for instance, with biology, history, geography, and other topics. So these places can be also important, not only for geoscience education, but also for other science. And finally, the economic use. So I'm talking about geotourism. There are several definitions of geotourism. It's a tourism, as it says here in this definition, which sustains and enhances the identity of a territory, taking into consideration the geology, environment, culture, aesthetics, heritage, and the well-being of its residents. This is a definition that is used by geoparks. It was produced in a scientific event that happened here in Portugal in 2011, so 10 years ago. I'd like to say that sites that are interesting for geotourism, mainly, they are based on geomorphological and paleontological heritage. This type of sites can attract people more easily. Landforms, landscapes, and fossils. It is, of course, much more easy to attract people to see a dinosaur footprint than to see a specific type of granite. So geomorphological and paleontological heritage are usually much more useful for geotourism. And we are talking about sustainable tourism. We are not talking about mass tourism. We are not talking about a tourism that will put at risk the social and the cultural setting of that area. We are talking about sustainable tourism. And of course, when we want to prepare a site for geotourism, it requires a certain management. Not all sites are important for geotourism. if we want to present a site for geotourism, we have to prepare that site. We have to give interpretation resources for people to understand what are they seeing, what are they, in order for them to understand that site. Because as we all know, most of our citizens in our countries, they know very little about geology. So they don't know the relevance of a certain rock or of a certain fossil. So we need to explain in a very clear way, very simple way. We need to explain why that site was preserved and why that site is important. And only if people can understand the value of the sites, they can also help us to manage that site. So I said I was referring before about man-made threats, and it is due to these threats that geoconservation is so important. We need to try to get ways to mitigate these man-made threats. And I will just refer here very briefly some of the main threats for me. And the first one is exactly the ignorance of our society concerning these topics. The general public knows nothing about these words of geoheritage or even geology. Our politicians also, they have usually a very no knowledge about these themes. So cultural and science illiteracy is a huge problem, is a threat for geoconservation. Another threat is mining, of course that we need mining. We cannot survive without mining. We need to have exploitation of geological resources, of course, but we need to understand that mining can be a threat to geoconservation. Urban development, and we know that the tendency for the next decades is to have in our planet bigger and bigger and bigger cities with occupying large territories. So this urban development, of course, will put at risk some of these places. Also, and we have learned before about the fact that in India, presently, there is no legislation regarding geoconservation. Unfortunately, this is not just a problem of India, it's a problem in many other countries. So the deficient statutory protection is a threat for geoconservation, and inefficient administration. So the agencies that are responsible for the management of these places, usually they don't know how to work with geoconservation. They don't have experts on geoconservation, and so they are not efficient. We have also a problem of smuggling and illegal collecting and selling of samples. And this is a problem mainly for fossils and meteorites and some minerals. And we know that many of these samples, many fossils, are being sold all over the world. And these fossils and minerals come from countries where it was forbidden to sell these materials. So it's really a smuggling problem. Some scientific research can also damage sites, and unsustainable tourism and leisure activities can also put at risk many of these geological sites. So this is some of the man-made threats that can affect geological sites. And this is one of the reasons why we need to have a geoconservation strategy. Usually, I say that geoconservation is already a special domain under the geosciences umbrella. For me, geoconservation, and for many other colleagues, and we have published a paper about that, trying to justify this, for us, geoconservation is like mineralogy, paleontology, geochemistry, geophysics, volcanology, and other expertises under geosciences. So this is an applied geoscience, geoconservation, and we can establish very easily some links with the society. We are talking about natural elements, so it means that we are talking about the protection and the conservation of these natural elements. So we are talking about the relation between geoconservation and nature conservation. Also, the link with land use planning policies. It is very important that land use planning policies also begin to consider geoconservation in their documents and in their strategies. Of course, that there is a very clear link between geoconservation and education. We need to explain to society how our planet works in order for have our citizens to be responsible consumers and to understand the planet where we are living. Also, a link with the tourism strategies, and I referred before that geotourism is one type of use for geological sites, but everything is based on the scientific knowledge. And that's why I put here science as the base of this diagram. And all these 5 links can establish also very straightforward connections with these 3 pillars that you all know regarding sustainable development. And that's why we can also connect the 17 sustainable development goals of the Agenda 2030 with geoconservation. So geoconservation is not something that is isolated or separated from the main framework, but we need to show that geoconservation is in fact connected with all of this. I'm going to pass, I have already, it's already almost time to finish. I would like just to give an overview about examples of how geoconservation is being worked in several countries in general. At the level of the universities and research centers, we have courses either in the undergraduation or post-graduation. We have training workshops. These students, and particularly master and PhD students, are developing geoheritage inventories. They are doing research projects on these topics. Of course, that the number of scientific publications on geoheritage is increasing. We have more and more journals nowadays accepting papers about these topics. 5 or 6 years ago, it was very difficult. We had only one journal, but now, fortunately, we have more and more journals accepting papers on geoheritage. And of course, universities and research centers are also participating in outreach activities. Museums and interpretive centers are also very important because they can manage the ex situ geoheritage that I talked about, and they can also do scientific research. They have a high potential to attract students and young people, and they can raise awareness against illegal collection and smuggling of geological specimens. In many countries, there are protected areas, and of course that in India, there are also different types of protected areas, different categories of protected areas. Unfortunately, all over the world, these protected areas are not used to work with geoconservation. They were established and they have expertise only to work on the protection and conservation of biodiversity. And little by little, they need to understand that it is important to enlarge the scope of these protected areas, also to include geoconservation. But there are already several protected areas all over the world that are working with geoconservation. The Geological Service play a very important role in many countries. And I would like to give just one example of the Spanish Geological Survey that has a department with maybe 6 or 7 geologists, all PhD geologists working specifically and only on geoheritage. And this is just an example. There are other geological surveys in other countries with similar departments. And of course, these geological surveys are very important because they can contribute to the national inventory of geological sites. They can do the mapping of these sites. And so it is, if I can suggest something, perhaps is to try to convince your geological survey to organize a department or an office just devoted to geoconservation. That is happening in several countries. We have associations and scientific societies also involved in these topics. And I think it is also very important to try to persuade mining companies to work on geoconservation. And there are several examples that mining companies are helping to protect and to conserve certain sites that are inside their facilities. And if we explain what we want, we don't want to close these exploitations, these facilities. Of course, we understand that we need mining, but perhaps we can convince them that certain areas, for instance, of a certain quarry, can be very useful for educational purposes. And there are already several examples around the world where we have students visiting parts of a quarry that were left in a way that students can go and do some field work in those quarries. And other parts of the quarry, of course, are still active. And this can be arranged with mining companies. So that's another thing that perhaps we can try to pursue. I don't have time here to explore this. I just want to stress 3 things to finish. One is that we have already 2 main tools at the international level to recognize geoheritage. Of course, the first is the World Heritage Convention by UNESCO. This convention was created in the beginning of the 70s of last century. And in order to have a certain site listed in the World Heritage list, there are 10 criteria where 6 are related with cultural heritage and 4 are related with natural heritage. And of these 4, criteria number 8 is specifically concern geology. So it means that we have, and here I can show you, we have already almost 100 sites in the World Heritage List that are included for geological reasons. So UNESCO recognizes the importance of geological sites through the World Heritage Convention. And I was searched about this information. There are 38 properties in India included in the World Heritage List. The majority of them are cultural sites, and there are 7 natural sites and 1 mixed. And but I have checked that no site was included concerning this criterion number 8. So no site was included due to geological reasons. Another instrument that we have is global geoparks. So as you know, UNESCO since 2015 decided to create a new international initiative calling Global Geoparks. And now we have 161 geoparks in 44 countries around the globe. The number of geoparks, as you can see, has been increasing very fast. So the interest about this kind of strategy is very high. And we have here, to give you an overview, a diagram showing that 25% of all geoparks are in China. And these are some of the countries with a higher number of geoparks. So Spain, Italy, Japan, France, and the UK. Geoparks are strategies to foster, to promote the local sustainable development based on the existence of geoheritage, but also in connection with other types of heritage. So biological heritage and cultural heritage. So geoparks are not geological parks, and sometimes there is a confusion about this. Geoparks are not geological parks, meaning this is not a way to conserve and to protect geosites. This is a way to promote a new type of sustainable development, and is focused on raising the living conditions of the populations of the communities that is living inside the geopark. So finally, I'd like to say a few words about IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. It's the main international organization regarding nature conservation. It is responsible for the assessment of this criterion 8 under the World Heritage Convention. It has a geoheritage specialist group, and since 2008 has been approving resolutions stressing the importance of geodiversity and geoheritage. And last year, IUCN has approved 2 more resolutions, geoheritage and protected areas, resolution number 74, and another resolution concerning the conservation of the natural diversity and natural heritage in mining environments. So very related with what I've been telling you. IUCN produced a lot of documentation, and recently IUCN started to produce documentation regarding geoconservation. I have here a chapter published in 2015 in this volume, Protected Area Governance and Management. And last year, we produced another book with guidelines for geoconservation in protected and conserved areas, which are very important documents because they can help the managers of protected areas in order to work with geoconservation. Probably many of you know that during 2020, we tried to develop the idea of having an International Geodiversity Day. This initiative was very well succeeded, and we expect to have in next November the final and the definitive approval by the UNESCO General Conference for the establishment of this International Geodiversity Day that will be celebrated on the 6th of October of each year. So we expect to celebrate this year for the first time in 2022, and I am sure that this will be an excellent opportunity to talk about geodiversity and geoheritage all over the world. Thank you very much for your attention. And of course, I am available to try to clarify some issues that you might think they are interesting. Thank you very much.
Well, that was a wonderful talk and an excellent presentation, José. Thank you so very much for all that. There are some questions in the chat box. I would like to read them out for you. One question is, how many geologists are there in the Spanish Geological Survey? Any idea?
Well, I don't know the number of geologists in the Geological Survey altogether. I know that the Department of Geoheritage of the Geological Survey has 7-8 people working full-time on geoheritage.
Okay, wonderful.
And I know that there are other geological surveys with also this type of departments. For instance, there is a department also in the Geological Survey of Iran, with four or five persons working with geoheritage. So it's that is happening in the United States. There are some state geological service, not the USGS, but state geological service that also have some departments on geoheritage.
Okay, there's another question. How is biodiversity related to geoheritage?
Well, that's a very important question, and we still need research on that, because it's easy to understand that there is a relation between geodiversity and biodiversity, meaning that we have some species that are adapted to a certain habitat, and that habitat and that ecosystem are defined, for instance, for a certain type of rock or a certain landform. We have specific types of birds that only have their nests in rocky cliffs, for instance. We have a special type of plants that only exist in soils with a certain type of chemical elements that are originating after the weathering of the minerals of the rock. So there are a lot of examples showing that biodiversity is related with geodiversity. The question is to know about the relation between geoheritage and biodiversity, because it means that it is not just a certain type of rock or soil, but it means that we have to have a special site, a special place for geological reasons, and that place also is also important for biodiversity. And to be honest, I think that there is no direct relation. So it means that we may have sites with very important geoheritage that they are not so relevant for biodiversity, and we can have the opposite. We can have places with very, very rich geoheritage and also with very rich biodiversity. And I am sure that we have examples for all cases, but there is no direct relation between geoheritage and biodiversity, my opinion.
Okay. Then I don't know whether this is a comment or a question. It's a soft version of letterhead and supporting papers if mandatory step from government may protect natural green. I wouldn't bother you with this because it's not very clear to me even.
Yeah, I don't understand.
And there are compliments to you, José.
Thank you.
And what are the important geoheritage sites of Portugal and nearby areas which we as geoscientists should be aware of?
Well,
your fingertips.
Well, in Portugal, we had a scientific project coordinated by my university, but with the participation of all universities in Portugal. And we had that project in order to make the inventory of geological heritage with scientific value. We just did the inventory for the scientific value. And so we have in our list, we have around 300 sites, and we used in order to do this inventory, we used the method that was developed by ProGeo, by the European Association for the Conservation of Geological Heritage. And so it means that we have 27 themes, what we call geological frameworks, meaning that we have 27 stages that were important in order to understand all the geological history of our territory. And we have 300 sites that represent these themes. So and we have a huge diversity of sites. We have paleontological sites, we have mineralogical sites, we have everything. So, but in order to do that, of course, first we had to do the national inventory. This is something that the geological community in each country should try to develop. Because only the geoscientists, only us, can do this kind of inventory, because we are the ones that can understand and we can assess what is the scientific value. I'm not talking about aesthetic value or cultural value. I'm not talking about those values. I'm talking about just of the scientific value. And this is something that each geological community can do.
Thank you. May I request all of my colleagues to mute their mics? Intermittently, there is some noise coming, so that is not very nice. Thank you very much. The next question is, can you share the format of inventory which one can use for geoconservation and geoheritage?
Well, I can do that if we have 2 more days in order to explain and to give you a short course.
You're most welcome.
Unfortunately, I was planning to give a short course in the International Geological Congress, but unfortunately, the COVID stopped everything. So I can provide some information and literature and papers about this. So please send me an email and I will give you some details. But it is impossible to explain in detail how to do this now.
On a serious note, José, would it be okay for you to plan a workshop in the coming months or whenever it's convenient for you, so
yes,
that we can benefit from your expertise and knowledge?
Yeah, it's possible to do that.
Okay.
Next week I will give a short course for Colombia, for instance, and so it's a question of define a theme, 3 or 4 aims in order to focus the aim of the course. And for instance, inventory methods could be a topic, and we can arrange that. Just a matter of making the preparation.
Okay. Thanks for that. We can plan that in the coming weeks.
Yeah.
And the next question is, can you guide us as to how we can propose geoparks to UNESCO, as there isn't any geopark in India?
Yeah. This is one of the questions that also don't have an easy answer. Because I'm not familiar with the political setting of your country, the social setting, and so it's very difficult for a foreigner to try to give advices. I know more or less how to do it in Europe, but when I go, for instance, to Latin America or other places, I have big problems because I don't know the context. And this is really important because in theory, a geopark should follow what they call a bottom-up strategy, meaning it's a community that wants to develop a geopark and tries and wants to see if this kind of strategy could be a solution for their own community. I usually say that a geopark is something that we should try to develop when we have a problem. If we have everything working perfectly, if we have communities living very well, if we don't have an unemployment, if we have everything perfect, we don't need geoparks. So we should understand a geopark as a tool that could be helpful in order to solve a problem that we have in a certain area with certain communities. And of course, there is some requirements. One of the requirements, if we are talking about the UNESCO Global Geopark, is that we have to have geological heritage of international relevance in that territory. That's one of the requirements, right? But in fact, we must start thinking about the local at the local level. Of course, you can put me a question. What about China? Well, China, the context is completely different. and bottom up is not working there. It's top to bottom. So it's something that is decided at a higher level and implemented in the lower level. But
Yes.
again, it depends on each country. It depends on each country. So it's very, that's why it's so difficult but I will just give you a suggestion. People that want to work with geoparks really need to understand what a geopark is, and need to understand what are the different strategies to work toward the geopark. And nowadays there are online courses about geoparks. The UNESCO provides information about geoparks. So perhaps if you really, some of the colleagues here wants to develop an idea of a geopark project for a certain area, perhaps I would advise to contact UNESCO and saying, listen, I am here, we are just starting with this idea, and we'd like to have training on geoparks or whatever, because UNESCO is very interested to have more geoparks in more countries. And of course, India is a key country. And so I am sure that UNESCO would be very interested to provide assistance in order to help you to organize geoparks. So perhaps it is my advice.
Okay, thank you.
To contact the Earth Science section inside UNESCO.
Yes, yes. A related question from me. For a democratic country like India, which approach is preferable, top to bottom or bottom to top, in your opinion?
Well, it is impossible. Well, in Europe, it is impossible to have something coming from the top without the agreement of the lower level. If something happens like that, it will cause a revolution. And we have already, not only in Europe, but in many countries, we have examples that kind of strategy was not good. For instance, in the United States, when they created the national parks, the famous national parks that are really famous, that they are really important, Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, all those parks, Yosemite, exactly. When they created that, they didn't thought that there were people living on those areas. So they took all those communities and they put outside the parks, the national parks, and they created a problem that even today it exists. So that's why it is very important to start from the bottom level. We need to understand, to talk with the leaders of the communities. Of course, that when we are going to talk with these leaders, we need to be, we need to know exactly what we want to say, and we need to explain clearly what a geopark is. We cannot arrive there and say, well, listen, we want to create here a geopark in order to protect this rock. What do you think? Well, it's not that question. So, and to be honest, here in Portugal, when we start talking about geoparks and when our project started, it was very, very important one thing. We, in a specific geopark, I'm thinking this, we made several workshops with the local community. We made several meetings with the local leaders, the mayor, everything, so many meetings. And everything was more or less stopped. And everything was solved when we decided to organize a visit from the mayor to another geopark. And he went to, I think at that time, he went to Greece to visit a geopark that was already implemented and it was already working. And when the mayor returned, he said, now I understood what a geopark is. And now I am convinced that this kind of strategy also could work here. And from that moment, we could be succeeded with the Geopark project. So it is very important for these community leaders to really understand what is a geopark.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. The next question is, are there any lists ready which mention the threatened and endangered sites, just like that for biodiversity?
No, there is not yet such list, but we are thinking about that. There is I think that this colleague is talking about something similar with the red list for biodiversity. So species that are in danger and so and in fact we don't have a global inventory of geoheritage. We don't have that yet. There was a project to do such an inventory in the 90s of last century by IUGS, but unfortunately that project was not concluded. And right now, there are two ideas to try to renovate that task of having a global inventory. So only after we have a global inventory, we can also have an indication of which sites are under threat, are at risk. So for the moment, no, we don't have this.
Okay. Then as paper is made by cutting plants and trees, so if government banned hard paper transaction, it may conserve natural geoheritage. That's just a comment. Don't bother about that. Do you have an example of a geo-excursion site exclusive for geo-education?
Yes, there are several examples of this because sites that are very relevant for education, and that's it. And usually these sites have certain characteristics. One, they are close from the schools. That's one requisite. Second, they show geological features or geomorphological features that can be easily understood by the students. For instance, if we want to show a fold, we need to choose an outcrop where any student arrive there and understands what a fold is, not those folds that we geologists sometimes want to imagine, and we don't see it really in the field, but we know that the fold is there, but we don't see it in the field. No, that's not the right place to bring students. We need to bring students to places where there is a fold that is clear for everyone.
Yes.
And also we need to have those sites in places where it is safe to have our students. Sometimes we have excellent sites, geological sites, but they are, for instance, near a road with high traffic, where it is not safe to have 20 students with us in that road. So there are a combination of characteristics that we should think of when we select a site that is relevant for educational purposes.
Okay, I think it's time to wind up, and before we do that, let me say that this program was sponsored by Travelosthan Holidays, and Mr. Gunjan Mathur, from Travelosthan Holidays may wish to say a few words. Mr. Gunjan.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Please go ahead.
First of all, I would like to thank Society of Earth Sciences Lucknow and for giving this opportunity to organize this webinar. And also, I am associated with Professor Suresh Mathur from past 3 years from 2009 when he started this heritage walk in Jodhpur. And in fact, we last year also we due to this pandemic we could not organize on a physical way, but we did 2 lectures like this on the online webinar portal. So that I have shared the recordings in the group, and it was nice to interact with, listen to especially Jose for giving this wonderful information about the geoheritage sites and the geo parks which are on in the world on the international level. So it's my pleasure to be part of this program, and I would try to try inculcating the geoheritage sites of India whenever we plan our itinerary in the forthcoming tours. Thank you for this opportunity.
Such a wonderful presentation by Jose deserves a profound thanks from all of us. And to do this, we have Professor Rameshwar Bali, the Vice President of the Society. Professor Bali, your turn now to say a big thank you to Jose.
Thank you, Shankar Saab. So on behalf of the Society of Earth Scientists, I extend my sincere thanks to Professor José Brilha from the University of Minho, Portugal, for accepting our invitation for delivering this very important talk on a very important topic related to the conservation strategy of geodiversity and geoheritage at international levels. Today, on this Geoheritage Day, which we have been celebrating on 21st of July. So the talk was, as said by others, the talk was very, very thought-provoking, very, very, he highlighted the scientific importance of geoheritage and the need to preserve our geoheritage. Then he also has given us ways and means to how to approach on this very important topic. So thank you once again, Professor Jose, for such a nice lecture given to us. We already have seen that you have a vast experience in this field of geoheritage, and certainly we will be needing your guidance in future for taking up this very important issue at our level in India. I would then like to thank Dr. Shankar, who is member of the IUGS on Geoscience Education, Training and Technology Transfer, for being the moderator and helping us in organizing this event. Well, here in India, the scientists in general are very much concerned about the loss being made to our geological treasures and the non-serious approach of the ignorant lawmakers as well as the common man, by which a number of our valuable treasures are being, we are losing them, and we find we need a definite approach to preserve them. I'm thankful to some of the distinguished geoscientists who are part of the today's deliberations, including Mr. S.K. Vadavan, the former Director General of Geological Society of Geological Survey of India, Dr. V.P. Mishra, Professor D.M. Banerjee from Delhi University, then our chairman, Dr. Rasik Ravindran, Dr. Rajiv Nigam, Mr. V.K. Joshi, Siddharth Swarup Saab, Prabhas Pandey Saab, a number of senior members. Now these persons, they have been pursuing this issue of geoconservation and preservation right from a number of, I could say, decades. And then the Society of Earth Scientists has taken up this issue of conserving this georesources from last few years, and sincere efforts are being made to approach the lawmakers to understand our problem, like Professor Jose just now described, taking mayor to the field, to the other geoparks. Similarly, we are also trying to approach. So this serious issue has been taken up as suggested by Professor Jose. We have also taken up this issue of enlightening the students for taking up, because they are the budding geologists, they are going to take up the issue. So a number of institutions, universities, they have taken up this issue, and like we at Lucknow University, we have introduced a separate optional paper on geoheritage and geodiversity at our postgraduate level. So hopefully we may come up with the new budding geologists who will take up the issue in future courses. So I'm thankful to all the senior geoscientists who have attended, and the young geologists, people from GSI, BSIP, NIO, many organizations have been here. So at the end, I also extend my sincere thanks to Mr. Gunjan Mathur from the Travelosthan Holidays for sponsoring this event. So thank you everybody for joining us for this important lecture, and thanking you once again, Professor Jose, for this lecture. Thank you.
2 words to Jose. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Yes, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Like you said in the last?
I said thanks very much in Portuguese or Spanish.
Portugal. Very nice. Very nice. Thank you.
To make him feel at home.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's nice. Okay.
Okay, goodbye all of you. Nice to see you and see you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And special thanks to Dr. Tripathi and SCS for organizing this program.
Thank you, sir.
Useful. Yes.
Thank you, sir. To your kind cooperation and support and guidance that we are proceeding.
It's our efforts. It's our efforts. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Tripathi, for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you, Gunjanji. Well organized program.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Gunjan. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you, sir.